All right, click the links to join the channel here or over at subscribe. So I got a mailbox. Want to mail me some comics. So Rogue One, I think that was the best out of the 5 Disney movies that they made. Maybe honorable mention to Solo. I know people like that. It was okay. It's just, I mean, everything was okay when you compare it to the horror that was the Disney trilogy. So rebooting Star Wars, please just stop. This dude gives this interview, and he's not specifically important, but his comments are, because it shows you where Hollywood is now, how far Hollywood is sunk. He's talking about rebooting Star Wars if he was offered a chance to do a new Star Wars and take it in a new direction, with the Mary Sue type of characters. Or then he started thinking about, well, what about if we rebooted it, because the original Skywalker family seems to be the focus of the original trilogy. So what a reboot means is you retelling the story using the original characters with obviously new actors. So they'd start, because it's 50 years later, they'd start with the 77 Star Wars script and just remake the movies with modern filmmaking techniques, which is a little tricky because they were using puppets and practical effects and models. Like some of those starships are just wooden models with fiber optics built in them, and they're 10 to 20 feet long. And some of the Death Star was like this huge model that you actually walked on. It was so big, and it looked really good because it didn't have the perfections of CGI. They were actual physical cardboard and wood models. And if Disney did it, anything Disney does now is going to be an abomination, because the original film was lightning in a bottle with the original, the main cast. You look at the main cast of Star Wars and you're like, yeah, there's no way in hell of trying to replicate that cast. You're just going to be doomed to failure. That's part of the reason Solo kind of ran into troubles, because the chemistry of the two main actors just wasn't there. And Solo was okay, at least, I mean, compared to the Disney trilogy, it was okay. But and maybe it would be fun to see Disney's take on a reboot. It wouldn't have to suck, but it just wouldn't have the magic of the originals. It's hard to describe the effect the 77 Star Wars had on people, because it was and the thing is, if Disney's doing it, then Disney is gonna, whatever Disney touches, they're gonna ruin. But the original movie had a decent budget for, I think it was like $9 million at the time, which was a fair amount of money, but it also took itself seriously, which a lot of sci-fi did not at the time. And a lot of sci-fi was just ridiculously low budget. And the thing is, you got a different feeling that Lucas took the show seriously, where the stuff that had come before it, Star Trek, Star Wars, they took themselves seriously. And it worked, because people went to watch Star Wars several times in the theater. Ask yourself what modern film you'd rewatch in a theater. Or you'd go back like every weekend to go watch it again. And keep in mind, at that time, you'd be standing in line to watch it, because that's how pumped people were. Almost nothing is worth watching nowadays, because that's just how bad stuff is. And then there's also the greater societal picture of nowadays there's so many distractions in the terms of entertainment and bread and circuses. I mean, back in 77, you had a record player, you had a TV with a few channels, and you had radio, and you had live concerts, but you didn't have TV, you didn't have video games, you didn't have home movies, you didn't have a lot of stuff that people just kind of assume, that kind of came out in the 80s, when cable, 80s and 90s, when, I mean, there's some areas like in the late 80s that's we're just barely getting cable, and then in the 90s people got the internet. But there's so much to distract us that any one thing doesn't have the impact that it used to. Like, you'll never get another Beatles or Elvis kind of vibe, or even arena bands in the 80s, like a Metallica, Guns N' Roses type of thing, with that kind of energy. Like Taylor Swift has some of it, but even her, as much energy as she have, it doesn't even come close to the stuff they had in the 70s and 80s. You can watch that concert Leonard Skinner played in the Oakland Coliseum in 77 or 74 or something. Or, Black Sabbath. Imagine seeing them. God, what a great show they would be in the 70s. The thing is, also, films can't do what they did with the original Star Wars, is have a bunch of beautiful, fair-skinned people running around them, because the globalists say, well, no, everything has to be diverse now, which is obviously cancer. So movies end up just sucking today. They just lack a lot of the spark that gave old movies such magic. And I think the last great movie that had some of that magic was probably Lord of the Rings, which was 20 years ago. So the modern version is the diverse Rings of Power, which obviously sucks. So this guy's talking about how Disney had shifted focus away from the Skywalker family to this Rey character that nobody really cared about. He was trying to be careful not to upset Disney, but he said that he'd be more interested in retelling the original Star Wars. But that shows you where Hollywood is, that's even something like the reboot concept or the remaking stories. you look at Hollywood and thinking like that doesn't seem like a good sign. If like rebooting things or softly rebooting things, I just it's like, can't you guys create something new? And it's the Tolkien quote of like, evil can't create. So they remake these 80s films, not because it's not so much that they're out of ideas, but because everything has to be politically correct. That they're out of ideas, making politically correct films that will also sell. That is an uphill battle for them, because Hollywood loves diversity and they love race swapping, but the audience doesn't. So they'll do the bait and switch, is what you've been seeing over the past 10 years, where something like The Little Mermaid or the Peter Pan movie that came out, you're like, yeah, we didn't see either one of those. Yeah, not many people did. Where they're giving you a name you associate with a good movie that you had seen before, but then they erase the people, that the original characters from the movie, and they replace them with these new non-white actors, which you don't want to see, because you want to see the original characters. That's the association you have with the movie. And Disney, if you say that, it's like, well, like the Hollywood will literally get on social media and insult the audience who just wants to see the original characters. You go, listen, if you want to make something new, why don't you make something new? And the answer is because it won't sell. Well, then why are you making it at all? Because representation is important. But then write something new but it won't sell. Okay, so then what you're doing is just bait and switch propaganda. Yeah, that's literally what they're doing. Anyway, so what they did with the 2015 Disney Star Wars was, I got a bad feeling about this, was a soft reboot, which means they had some of the original characters, but they were, aged up to their current age. But some of the plot elements were very similar to the original movies, sometimes painfully so. I don't know if they expected people hadn't seen the originals, or the kids hadn't seen the original. The thing is, the Disney Star Wars was your chance to get the next generation on board Star Wars, and they absolutely destroyed any opportunity they had at that. So instead of a Death Star, it's a weapon on a planet. It's just as stupid as it sounds, which makes you wonder why they bothered to buy the movie rights from Lucas if they weren't going to bring anything fresh to the table. Kind of makes me think, like, before you sit around and as a company decide to buy these rights, talk to some writers, talk to somebody and think like, okay, what stories do we have planned out? What are we going to do with it? And the best idea they had was, oh, we're going to kind of reboot the trilogy. It's like, that was your best idea, to buy the rights to this. And it's like, well, we'll use it for the theme parks and sell merchandise. Yeah, but the theme park wasn't a big hit because the movies were bad, and the merchandise was non-existent because the movies were bad. Because it representation, diversity, inclusion, and equity. Yeah, but nobody cares about any of that stuff, but a bunch of the, very small percentage of these far left-wing whack job globalist echo chamber types who literally thinks the rest of the world is all Hugo Boss because they're not on board seeing these characters swapped out. Anyway, people didn't love Lucas prequels, and I think he got his feelings hurt about that, but they were light years better than Disney. I can't imagine them actually rebooting the original films, because that would just be an admission of failure. It's like, well, yeah, you're seeing Disney fail left and right. They've had a lot of bombs lately. All Disney has to do to turn this around is, can you remove the diversity and maybe use men in the lead roles instead of these Mary Sue Purse puppies? Because nobody is interested in watching the breastless girl who wears arm bandages in the desert for some reason. It's hot. You don't wear tight clothing. And her costume is a combination of tight and loose clothing. Doesn't make any sense. You'd wear loose white clothing. The Saudis pretty much have that costume nailed down, but they had her wear arm bandages, which I guess she wraps that's just so stupid. And the next Star Wars movie is going to be her, and it's probably going to be pretty lackluster. Just give us some Luke and Han type of characters. Can we get that? No more diversity. It's not selling. Or at least do it like they did in Empire Strikes Back, where they very successfully introduced a nuanced, complicated Lando Calrissian. Lando wasn't a purse puppy. He was in a tricky position and was clever enough to figure out a path out of that Gordian knot, and I realized that doesn't make any sense. He had to temporarily sacrifice one guy to save the rest, and then he was double-crossed. He teamed up for the rescue in Jedi Strikes Back, and they all did some courageous stuff by sneaking into the Jabba's castle out there. That's what a multifaceted character looks like. And people loved Lando, and he deserved it because he was well written. But modern Disney just sees a black actor, and it's like just a point on a diversity checklist, and they can't handle it. So Disney would be better off just not using non-white actors because they just can't write them without being cringy, which obviously is not going to happen. But Disney can't do anything. They painted themselves into a corner with wokeness. Yeah, this costume doesn't make sense. It's a combination of tight and loose in the desert. At least during the day, it's pretty warm in the desert, though it does get cold at night. So if someone suggested a new Disney movie with a bunch of characters that look like the original, they'd just be confused. They'd wonder if you'd gone crazy. Like, what about representation? Like, yeah, we're not going to go for that. It's not selling with the audience. Like, well, if we just keep doing it long enough, the audience will get on board with this. Like, why don't we just give the audience what they'll pay for? Not what they say they want, but what they'll actually shell out money for. Anyway, the reason you can't have new actors for James Bond, or why you can, sorry, for Marvel types of movies, the Iron Mans, the Infinity War type of stuff, is because those are continuous stories that come out every 2 to 3 years, and they're meant to be. They're series. Like, James Bond is obviously a series. Like, when you start making the first movie, assuming it's successful, you're going to have to maintain an actor who's anywhere from 30 to 50, and you're going to age out of those roles. And the more important reason is, as good as those movies are, and they were okay, they're fun movies, they're not iconic films. No film, I don't think any film, did what the original Star Wars did. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. Like I said, maybe Jaws had some of that magic for people, but Jaws was I was going to say it's a one-off, but no, I forgot they made sequels. But I mean, nobody saw that. The sequels were just like not taken seriously. But Indiana Jones probably had some of that energy, but I don't think anything came close to the original 77 Star Wars in the trilogy. It was just, it was a time in filmmaking that they fired on all 8 cylinders, and that you're never going to replicate that. So it was an iconic trilogy. And people did mildly enjoy Marvel and James Bond, but that's it. People fell in love with Star Wars. There's a huge difference. Nothing from Marvel movies comes close to that. Now Disney has Marvel, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Pirates of the Caribbean, and they cannot make good movies because they're trapped by political correctness. And it's of their own doing. Like, these people are fully on board all this woke stuff. So in the next 10 years, you're going to see Disney lose its place as the pinnacle of the entertainment industry. And you're going to see Hollywood as a whole slowly lose importance because everything woke turns to absolute crap. Reboot. With Hollywood and Disney in general, just think of the worst possible things that they could possibly do. Like Indiana Jones retelling the German bad story in 3 out of 5 movies. Like, anyone would look at something like that and go, that you kind of feel like you're just going back to the same old storyline. 3 out of 5 Indiana Jones movies, you're using that World War II trope about the Germans being bad. It's like, it's been done. You did 5 movies. You can't do 3 out of 5. Like, doing 2 was kind of weird. You had the Germans in the first movie. Okay, fair enough. The second one was set in India, I think. The third one, I think they went back to the Germans. Like, that was kind of stupid. Like, it's done. The Germans are done. And then the fourth one, they did the communists. It's like, okay, that makes sense. The Cold War. The fifth one, logically, or the sixth one, whatever. No, fifth, I think, logically should have been the communists also, because it was during the space race, the Cold War. No, we're going to travel back in time. That's insane. That's insane. How well did that movie do? I don't know. Lost a lot of money. Anyway, you're going to, the next 10 years, you're going to see Hollywood just change because they can't make good movies. They can make woke movies, but people don't want to see woke movies. People want to see the original characters, and you're not going to get that. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. See you guys all next episode.